An ABC News brief. Now from New York, Bob Jamieson.
Good afternoon. Warnings are in effect as Tropical Storm Gordon moves across the Florida peninsula. 3 people have died in tornadoes spawned by Gordon. One day after the Fed raised interest rates, the Consumer Price Index showed a rise of just 0.1%. And in 2 new studies, the Centers for Disease Control say adults are smoking less than at any time in the last 50 years, but more high school seniors are smoking. More on World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
An ABC News brief. Now from New York, Bob Jamieson.
Good afternoon. At the O.J. Simpson trial, defense attorney Johnny Cochran cross-examined the first police officer to arrive at the murder scene. Cochran tried to show that police mishandled the investigation from the start. At least 40 Cubans, some suffering from exposure, came ashore on the Gulf Coast of Florida after their boat broke up a half-mile out. And the movie Forrest Gump captured 13 Oscar nominations, the most of any film in nearly 30 years. More later on World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
An ABC News brief. Now from New York, Morton Dean.
Good afternoon. Newt Gingrich has been re-elected Speaker of the House of Representatives. After weeks of speculation and controversy, only a few Republicans deserted Gingrich. Earlier, Democrats tried unsuccessfully to postpone the vote until after the Speaker's ethics problems are resolved. In Morocco, liftoff for British tycoon Richard Branson, hoping to become the first balloonist to fly around the world. And on World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, solutions. Are your children safe when they drive? We found one program that could save their lives.
An ABC News brief. Now from New York, Bob Jamieson.
Good afternoon. President Clinton announced his new national security team today. He chose UN Ambassador Madeleine Albright to be the first female Secretary of State and picked a Republican, Senator William Cohen, as Secretary of Defense. He also named Anthony Lake the new director of the CIA and appointed Sandy Berger National Security Advisor. On World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, career women who become full-time moms and a support group that helps them.
An ABC News brief. Now from New York, John McKenzie.
Good afternoon. No mistrial. That ruling from the judge in the Susan Smith trial after he was told one of the jurors inadvertently made contact with a Smith relative. An undercover agent who was inside the Waco compound just before it was raided confirmed to lawmakers that David Koresh was tipped off to the impending raid. And the first combat troops from the UN Rapid Reaction Force have taken up positions just outside Sarajevo. More later on World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
You've heard the stories of their stormy...
An ABC News brief. Now from New York, James Walker.
Good afternoon. The jury in the O.J. Simpson trial, which had not heard testimony for 10 days, was back in the courtroom. Defense attorney Johnny Cochran cross-examined Detective Tom Lang, trying to establish that police mistakes made it harder to determine the time of death. President Clinton said he will name a panel to study Gulf War-related illnesses. And the former chairman of United Way goes on trial today for misusing the charity's funds. More on World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
An ABC News brief. Now from New York, Bob Jamieson.
Good afternoon. In Washington, President Clinton gave his first major policy speech since re-election. He said balancing the federal budget was his top priority and pledged to govern from the political center. In New York, a new study says at least 6 million American children live in poverty and millions more live just above the poverty line. And on World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, saving kids from life on the streets. One program that works. That's News Brief.
An ABC News brief. Now from New York, Bob Jamieson.
Good afternoon. Standing near the border of Iraq and Kuwait, President Clinton today praised American forces there for being the steel and the sword of U.S. diplomacy. The president then hinted that many of the troops would be home for the holidays. Mr. Clinton is also visiting Saudi Arabia. The U.S. economy grew at a rate of 3.4% in the third quarter, due mostly to an increase in consumer spending. We'll have more later on World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. That's News Brief.
An ABC News brief. Now from New York, Bob Jamieson.
Good afternoon. At a hearing in the Oklahoma bombing case, the truck rental clerk who identified suspect Timothy McVeigh now says he may have been mistaken in the description he gave investigators. Astronauts completed a 5th and final spacewalk overnight to repair the Hubble telescope. It will be released back into orbit tonight. Later on World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, solutions. The rehabilitation of convicts, reformed criminals teaching others by example.
An ABC News brief. Now from New York, Antonio Mora.
Good afternoon. At the White House, trying to revive the Middle East peace process, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu met with President Clinton after weeks of unrest between Israelis and Palestinians. In the northern plains, the seasons collide. Residents battle spring flooding while trying to recover from a weekend blizzard. And on World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, your health, new insights into why people relive terrifying events. That's News Brief.
And ABC News Brief, now from New York, Aaron Brown.
Good afternoon. The Northeast is digging out from a surprise spring snowstorm. From Maine to Maryland, the snow, more than 2 feet of it in some places, shut down airports and left hundreds of thousands without power. In Honduras today, a U.S. military cargo plane crashed while trying to land. 3 people died. And on World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, solutions revolutionizing the way we use the phone.